Dear friends, let us look at the ischemia trial from the imaging perspective. The background is with the Courage trial, what we saw that whether the patient with a stable ischemic heart disease is subjected to optimal medical therapy versus a PCI added to optimal medical therapy, there is no difference in the outcome. However, in the Courage trial, there was the randomization of the patients was done after invasive coronary angiography, and there was no minimal threshold of ischemia that was required to enter the trial. Why there was no survival benefit for revascularization in stable ischemic heart disease? This can be explained by this particular explanation. Now, the thing is, we have the patient with a severe obstruction here, where there is a fibrotic plaque, and that is flow limiting lesion. And this particular plaque is stable, but it is obstructing the lumen, and it causes the positive stress test, either a stress imaging test or a stress ECG test, and revascularizing that either with PCI or CABG, and with anti-angiogenic therapy, the patient finds relief of symptoms. However, there are so many other plaques in the same coronary which are non-obstructive, but they have a plaque which is quite high risk. It has got a very thin cap, and this is the one which can get inflamed, can rupture, and can produce an acute unstable angina or an acute ST elevation MI, and that can lead to even sudden cardiac death or a large transmural MI. Now these plaques need pharmacological stabilization and also early identification of a high risk. So we really don't know whether it is the ischemia that really matters as by this stable obstructive plaque, or is it the vulnerability of the plaque which are non-obstructive that really matters for the long-term outcome. Now, there are so many trials, the meta-analysis has shown on this y-axis the percentage of myocardium which is ischemic on the non-invasive test, and on the y-axis the hazards ratio. Now, on medical therapy, as the amount of myocardium becomes ischemic, the hazards ratio go on increasing, and with revascularization this slope is reduced, and this crossover occurs at around 10% volume of ischemic myocardium. Let us look at a case. This is a 54-year-old male, obese, hypertensive, diabetic, non-smoker, has a normal resting ECG. He has a chest pain on the running at top speed. He needs fitness for working on a offshore oil rig. So this patient, we subject him for a stress imaging, and this is a stress imaging. He goes for a stress CMR. The resting CMR shows no regional wall motion abnormality. With adenosine stress perfusion, one can see that there is a very large area of hypoperfusion in the anterolateral, posterolateral, and inferior territory. This is almost having 5 segments out of 16 segments. That is almost 30% of myocardium is showing perfusion defect. Now this patient is hardly symptomatic, and he has a large perfusion defect. He's already instituted on optimal medical therapy. Now the question is, should we add upfront a coronary revascularization in this patient? Whether that is going to improve his clinical outcome. Now that is the question in the ischemia trial. Whether in a stable patient with at least moderate ischemia on stress testing, is there a benefit of adding revascularization upfront over and above the optimal medical therapy? And in these patients, is there a high risk group depending upon ischemia that a routine revascularization strategy will improve the outcome? Now, let there be a disclaimer. Ischemia trial is neither a comparison of anatomical imaging versus functional imaging to improve the clinical outcome, or it is neither a comparison of imaging versus no imaging to improve clinical outcome, as was seen in Scott Hart. So the ischemia design was like this. The patients with chest pain were subjected to either a stress echo or a stress nuclear study or a stress MRI or a stress ECG. When these modalities showed at least moderate to severe ischemia, they were subjected to a coronary CT angio to rule out a left main disease and also to rule out a non-obstructive coronary artery disease. And then they were randomized either to a conservative management where they were optimally treated and their risk factors were controlled and the lifestyle modification was achieved. If it is successful, they were followed up. Those patients, even on optimal medical therapy, continue to have unacceptable symptoms, could cross over to invasive arm. While the other arm was the upfront invasive therapy, that is, they were subjected to optimal medical therapy and lifestyle modification, but over and above that, they received a coronary angiogram and then a revascularization either with PCI or CABG. The endpoints were the time to CV death, MI, hospitalization for unstable angina, heart failure, and resuscitated cardiac arrest. Now, the comparative definition of moderate to severe ischemia across the three imaging modalities was achieved by looking at the threshold at which the literature has shown that the event rates are more than 4 to 6% per year. So that for a nuclear stress was more than 10% of ischemic myocardium. That for stress echo was more than 3 segments out of 6 segments, 16 segments. For stress MRI, if it is perfusion, then it was at least 4 segments out of 32. Or if it was a dobutamine stress CMR, then it was more than 3 segments out of 16 segments. Now in ECG, you cannot have this kind of a threshold. So the exercise ECG had this blanket indication that there should be more than 1.5 millimeter ST depression in 2 consecutive leads with angina, and the ischemic threshold should be achieved before 7 minutes. Now these patients, when they underwent coronary CT, the inclusion criteria was more than 50% stenosis in a major epicardial vessel if they had undergone a stress imaging, or more than 70% stenosis in any proximal vessel or mid vessel if they had undergone a stress ECG. Now the major exclusion criteria was any left main disease more than 50% stenosis. Also the patients with with NYHA class 3 and 4 heart failure, those who were having very unacceptable angina or EF less than 35% and who had ACS within last 2 months, or patients who had a PCI or CABG in last 1 year were excluded. Patients with a low EGFR were randomized to the CKD arm of this trial. The study flow was like this. The patients screened were 8,518. Now almost 40% failed the screening. Now the major reasons was either the core laboratories thought that there was insufficient ischemia in 16%, or no obstructive coronary artery disease in 14%. That means these are the patients who had significant ischemia on stress imaging. However, the CT did not show an obstructive coronary artery disease. Now these were more women, and also they were quite symptomatic, and they were enrolled into the CIOA ischemia trial. And also 5% of the patients had unprotected left main disease and they were not enrolled. Now those patients who made through the screening, around 5,179 patients had a had a CT coronary angio, and then they were randomized into the invasive arm and to randomize and then otherwise randomized to the conservative arm. And then they were followed up for next 4.3 years, or a median of 3.3 years, and the follow-up was achieved almost in 99% patients. The stress modalities that were used was obviously the stress nuclear testing in almost 50% of the patients, the exercise stress ECG in around 25% of patients, stress echo in around 21% patient, and stress CMR in around 5% patient. The qualifying stress test by the core lab interpretation, almost more than half of them had severe ischemia, and almost 1/3 of them had a moderately severe ischemia. So these were patients who were really symptomatic, and the stress imaging had showed a very, very significant ischemia. Now these patients also achieved a very high level of optimal medical therapy. That means their LDL were maintained below 70. They were on statins. Their BP was less than 140. They were on aspirin or any other antiplatelet. and they had smoking cessation. And this was attained in almost 90% of the patients. Now, the mode of revascularization, that the first procedure of revascularization was achieved in 80% of the patients who were assigned to invasive arm. Now, interestingly, 20% of the patient in the invasive arm did not receive revascularization because two-thirds of them, that means 14% of them, actually did not have a significant disease on invasive coronary angiogram. Now, remember, these patients had passed through two checkpoints. They had a significant ischemia on stress imaging, and also they had a CT coronary angio showing significant coronary artery disease. Despite that, there was no significant disease on coronary angio, and one-third of them had a very diffuse disease that could not be revascularized. The PCI was achieved in 74% of the patient, and 26% of the patient underwent CABG. Now, in the conservative arm, at around 4 years, there was a crossover of 23% patients receiving some kind of revascularization. Now, the primary outcome of these was in the conservative arm. This is the graph of the events, and the red indicates the event graph of the patients who were assigned to invasive strategy. So, if we see the odds, the hazards ratio was just 0.93 and the p-value was 0.34. So there 15.5% was the event rate in cumulative event rate in the conservative arm, 13.3 in the invasive arm. So in the first 6 months, there was a 2% excess event rates in the invasive arm. And in the later part of the trial, at around 4 years, there was an excess of 2% events in the conservative arm. And this was mainly driven by the myocardial infarction. So in the first 6 months, the excess events were because of periprocedural myocardial infarctions, and in the late part of the trial, the excess events in the conservative arms were because of spontaneous MIs. There was no heterogeneity of the treatment effect. If we look at the severity of coronary artery disease, whether how many number of vessels were involved or whether there was a proximal LAD, there was no difference between the invasive arm and the conservative arm. And so also, how much was the severity of ischemia on the on the stress imaging, whether it was mild, moderate, or severe, there was no difference in the outcome between the invasive and the conservative arm. So, if we look at the angina frequency, those patients who had almost daily or weekly angina, the relief of angina was much better in the invasive arm as compared to the conservative arm. So the number needed to treat was 3. While those patients who hardly had any angina, there was not much difference in the angina relief between the two arms. So it looks like those patients who were significantly symptomatic derived maximum benefit out of invasive strategy. So in summary, the curves cross at around 2 years for both primary and secondary endpoints. There are 2% higher event rates in the invasive arm at 6 months, while 2% lower in event rates in the invasive arm at 4 years. And this is mainly driven by the periprocedural MIs and the spontaneous MIs. There is no heterogeneity of treatment effect by the type of stress test used, the severity of ischemia, or the extent of coronary artery disease. So in conclusion, an initial invasive strategy as compared to an initial conservative strategy, there was no difference in the reduced risk of CV death, MI, hospitalization, unstable angina, heart failure, or recessive cardiac event, cardiac arrest over median of 3.3 years. The quality of life differs a little bit. Those patients who were stable coronary artery disease, who had moderate to severe ischemia, and they had a durable improvement in angina in the invasive arm if they had very frequent angina or very severe angina. While those patients who did not have much angina, actually they did not have any difference in the quality of life. The limitations of the study is that this is an unblinded trial. There is no sham procedure as was done in the Orbiter trial. The women were included, but they were excluded because of they had more ischemia but non-obstructive coronary artery disease. The stress ECG The diagnostic accuracy of presence and extent of ischemia on stress ECG is very difficult to estimate. And the 25% of the patients who underwent a stress ECG as their entry test constituted almost 50% of the severe ischemia group. Another important thing is that we really don't know whether the other high-risk feature of the stress imaging, like transient LV dilatation, lung uptake, RV uptake, ejection fraction fall, they were included while considering the severity of ischemia. Now, interestingly, the the editors of JACC Cardiovascular Imaging sent a questionnaire to all the 4 imaging societies: the American Society of Echocardiography, the Nuclear Society, the CT Society, the CMR Society, and the Cardiac Angiography and Intervention Society, and they asked them a series of questions. How do the experts in your modality view the ischemia trial? Do you expect that the trial results will affect the utilization pattern in your modality? Is there still a prominent role of stress testing? Is there still a prominent role of ischemia testing? Is the hypothesis that more severe the ischemia, worse is the outcome, is still viable? And is there still a prominent role to search for a significant stenosis? Now, the answers given by all these societies is really fascinating and really balanced one. Let us look at what these societies said. Now, the argument by the editors was that the ischemia testing may no longer be needed because there was no particular therapy or treatment strategy based on the severity of ischemia as per the ischemia trial. Then the patients with suspected stable ischemic heart disease may straight away go for a CT coronary angio because it is efficient and cost effective to diagnose left main disease. It can efficiently diagnose no or non-obstructive coronary artery disease, and it can lead to intensification of the optimal medical therapy and lifestyle modification as seen on SCOT Heart. Or whether the patient with suspected stable ischemic heart disease, they should still be undergoing ischemic workup because the trial was not actually designed to test this hypothesis of anatomical imaging versus functional imaging to improve the outcome. And then the next argument was, is there a time to consider novel ischemia testing like say stress CMR or PET flow? Because the cardiac events would still occur in the patients with normal functional study as seen in the PROMISE trial. Now, so how should be the ischemia testing after the ischemia trial? Now, we have got 3 possibilities. One is that you still do an ischemia testing to determine the cause of symptom and the extent of ischemia, and then personalize the treatment. Second possibility is that you don't do any stress testing. You assess the pre-test probability of coronary artery disease. You don't have a firm diagnosis, but you start an expectant conservative management, achieve the lifestyle goals, put them on statins, antihypertensive, anti-diabetic medications to reach a target goals, and that will need a lot of motivation to the patient. Or the third strategy may be that you suspect a coronary artery disease, go for a CT coronary angio and rule out a left main disease, and then subsequently you do a ischemia testing. Now let us look the pros and cons of all these approaches. The argument against no testing is that the stress imaging to identify whether the patient's symptoms are due to coronary artery disease is really required. This helps to start and guide the optimal medical therapy. It also gives prognosis and it avoids an unnecessary treatment. Secondly, any revascularization in a stable ischemic heart disease should have a proof of ischemia. Third is that from the FAME2 trial, we know that the FFR guided revascularization improves the patient's long-term outcome beyond just relieving the angina. And the imaging that had been validated against FFR, like stress nuclear imaging, stress CMR imaging, stress echo imaging, should maintain their important role in the patient management. There is an argument against the coronary CT angio for all because just having a coronary stenosis itself neither infers that there is an ischemia and neither it explains the patient's symptoms reliably. Secondly, the CT coronary angio, the positive predictive value is not very robust. In the PROMISE trial, the CT coronary angio arm of anatomical imaging When it was compared with the functional imaging, there was no difference in the outcome at end of 2 years, and the arm through which the patients were randomized, the CT coronary angiogram, had more downstream coronary angiograms, more PCIs and CABG despite similar outcome. The left main disease prevalence was 5% in ischemia trial because they were all patients with a very significant ischemia. While for the all-comers trial like the Scott Hart, the incidence of left main disease was just 1 to 2%. The CT coronary angio is difficult to perform in patients with significant tachycardia, low GFR, contrast allergy, and also those who are known cases of coronary artery disease with multiple stents and severe diffuse calcification. In general, there is an argument against doing an anatomical imaging. First of all, the risk scores, current risk scores to identify a very low likelihood CAD are quite robust. So you need not have to irradiate everyone. Secondly, the CT coronary angio can miss the diagnosis of ischemia with non-obstructive coronary artery disease. It can overlook the microvascular disease and vasospastic angina and unnecessarily may lead to withdrawal of treatment. The concept of defining the high-risk plaque versus extensive ischemia by functional testing are not mutually exclusive. They are rather complementary. Secondly, just having an angina and just showing an anatomical stenosis is insufficient to identify patients in whom the angioplasty improves quality of life as shown by Orbiter trial. The invasive FFR is not correlated with post-PCR symptom relief as was seen with the post-hoc analysis of Orbiter trial. And in an invasive cath, there is always an oculostenotic reflex, the temptation to provide treatment once a lesion is found. So why ischemia testing is still valid? First, it is needed to diagnose the etiology of chest pain, provide prognosis, guide management, assess effectiveness of treatment. Now, ischemia trial actually excluded a large cohort of patients which actually make a major chunk of patients which come to stress echo or stress nuclear or stress AMR labs. Then in this trial, 30% of the patients had previous MIs, PCIs, and CABG, where actually stress imaging is more useful than the anatomical imaging. Then the stress testing offers a great amount of reassurance to the patients of chest pain syndrome. And a test like stress echo or stress CMR can identify non-coronary causes of cardiac symptoms like say hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, dissection, diastolic dysfunction, valvular disease, PH, myocarditis, infiltrative cardiomyopathy. So why it is the ischemia is still valid? Because INOCA was seen in 14% of patients in this ischemia trial, and that also has got a significant cardiovascular risk. The clinical significance of an epicardial stenosis is also modified by the microvascular structure and function. The ischemia testing provides a physiological guidance to do a PCI to a particular coronary. The ischemia trial, the ischemia testing prior to PCR or CABG showed a significant and durable angina of relief, anginal relief as compared to the COURAGE trial where the patient entered through anatomical imaging. And in the Orbiter trial, the DAC scores post-PCI were progressively more recovered than with increasing FFR. And the MR-informed study has shown that stress CMR has a very high diagnostic accuracy, has a prognostic utility, is non-inferior to invasive management, and it reduces the number of coronary angios and the revascularization procedures. Thank you.